So this is the new Koenigsegg Jesko. This is very, very emotional for me. In the press material, we'll hear a little bit more about the background stories, how I worked with my father for 5-6 years in the early years, and Jesko just turned 80 a few months ago, and we are having this 25th anniversary this year and a new car model. And I couldn't think of any better way than honoring my great father for all his help and just for being a great guy. He is, for sure, the greatest supporter I've ever had. Yeah, emotional. So, a little bit about the car. What are we seeing in front of us? This is a beast. This is the true follow-on, the child of the Agera RS and our madness at Koenigsegg. So at the other side of the stand we have the wonderful Regera, which is a monster in itself with power and torque like you can't believe. In a very friendly way, it gives you that power and torque on an everyday basis for the normal road, but also great on the track. But here we have really scaled it back down again with a track focus in mind, a raw visceral experience as a true descendant to the Agera RS. So to go into a little bit the details, this car has 880 kilos of downforce. Let's get rid of this. At 250 kilometers per hour. At 270 kilometers per hour, it has a ton, 1,000 kilo downforce. Just tremendous. Even with these extreme downforce numbers, beauty is important to us at Koenigsegg, that the car should be still beautiful to behold, and it needs to look like a Koenigsegg. And I think it probably looks more similar to the previous Koenigsegg's than it is. It has a completely new monocoque, which is a little bit longer than the Agera RS. If you look at the glass area, you can definitely recognize it as a Koenigsegg, but it's a little bit taller. It's a little bit more room in there. The wheelbase is extended by 40 millimeters. It's 2,700 millimeters wheelbase with rear wheel steering. And we have a new size of wheels, 20-inch in the front, 21-inch in the rear, with our lightest ever carbon fiber wheels, even though they are our biggest. The front wheels weigh 5.9 kilos, the rear ones 7.4. We have this massive active rear wing. It goes up for braking and goes down for high speed. It is the evolution of the one-to-one and the Agera RS concept, but I do believe it's probably the biggest wing on any production car ever. If that's anything to brag about or not, I don't know, but for sure it helps with downforce. And I don't know, does someone have the remote for the car to open up show mode so we can have a look underneath? Any Koenigsegg guy or girl with a remote? Otherwise I will go and do it myself, but... Oh, Dennis is coming? Yeah, do show mode, Dennis. Or I will do it. Okay, thank you. Here we go. So it retains the cool aspect of the Regera, that everything opens up in a robotic way with a very lightweight system. So this car is really track focused for being a Koenigsegg. So like on the one-to-one, we sacrificed the possibility to store the roof in the front for aerodynamics. You can still unscrew the roof. It's screwed in as a structural member for maximum stiffness, but you can unscrew it and leave it at home and drive fast back home if it's raining. That's kind of the solution for this car. There will be a sister car to this, which has less focus on downforce and more focus on top speed. Smaller splitter, smaller wings. There you can actually fit the roof in the front. And that goes under the working name, the Jesko 300. The 300 comes from the notion that potentially it could be fast enough to break the 300 miles per hour barrier. This car is very, very lightweight. It weighs 1,400 kilos curb weight, or just over, and dry weight is around 1,200 kilos. So for being a fully homologated car for the world market with all smart airbags and all emission control and catalytic converters, everything, it's extremely, extremely light. And we do believe it will be the fastest around big famous racetracks around the world among the fully homologated cars for worldwide use. If you look closely here at the suspension in the rear, and you can see a little bit in the front, we have upgraded our triplex suspension system to also have a helper spring, an hydraulic element, an active suspension unit. Because when this car hunkers down into track mode, the downforce almost doubles, and we still want it to be comfortable and good in normal ride height. So we need a suspension system that allows for a change in spring ratio and dampening by a factor of 2.5. If you also look closely in the rear, you will see we have rear wheel steering, and as we have a little bit longer wheelbase, that means it's still very good to drive around town with a short turning circle, and for extreme top speed, it's even better. If you look closely in the interior, we have now kind of an even more intelligent steering wheel with haptic touch pads, which can be configured over the air for future upgrades, and a small screen next to the steering wheel that moves with the steering wheel and where the graphics always stays leveled, even on the side. So you're never blocking out your instrument while turning, and it's always staying leveled, so it's easy to read. And then we have a homage to maybe Switzerland and its watch industry for analog watches, if you like. It's a completely analog G-force meter sitting on top proud on the dashboard. It's just powered by G-force. It's very fluid ball bearings on rings with weight on them, and when you drive sideways, one of the weights swings sideways, so you get a readout, and when you accelerate or brake, you have a rotating discs in the other direction with a weight. So it's really the simplest, most non-frill way of making a G-force meter, but using the G-force as the power to indicate what's actually going on. We have a completely new transmission for the car that we developed in-house. It's a 9-speed, 7 wet clutch transmission with an electronic differential. So with the Agera, we took the decision to go hybrid and direct drive. With the hybrid system, we could completely remove the need for shifting. Here we go the different direction. All the gears we saved in the Agera and that we shelved, we put in this car, jokes aside. But with the 9-speed gearbox, we can really utilize the perfect power band in the engine and make this the rawest visceral car. Of course, it doesn't have the same extreme low-end grunt like the Agera, but being a track car, it's okay that the power is a little bit higher up in the register. And what a register it is. Here we have gone to a flat plane crank, the world's lightest V8 crank as we're aware of, for a production car weighing 12 kilos. And there's hardly any flywheel on the engine, so it revs almost like a Formula 1 engine in neutral. And then you have the clutches and the starter motor and whatever is looking like a flywheel inside the transmission, which is capable of 1,500 newton meters of torque, which is what the engine outputs. And the transmission only weighs 90 kilos. for 9 speeds and 1500 Newton meters of torque. That's unheard of. Not only is it light and strong and has many gears, with this multi-clutch solution where we are compounding the gears, we have fewer gears than a normal gearbox due to a kind of a compounding effect of gears. And we can jump from any gear to any gear as fast as a DCT can jump from the gear you're in and its next pre-selected gear, which is only either up or down. Here you can go from 9th gear to 3rd gear in a millisecond. It just, you slip out of one clutch and you slip into another. There is no synchronization to wait for. There is no shifting through gear rails. You just go from one gear set to another, independent on who they are, immediately. So for that reason, for the first time in a long time, we put a gear lever in the car. Because if you're cruising on the highway at 60, 70 miles per hour, 110, 120 kilometers per hour, and you want to accelerate hard, you can double shift with this stick. You go, there's first a notch up and down for one gear up and down, and then if you push harder, you double kind of click it into the end stop, and then the gearbox will either jump to the lowest possible gear without over revving immediately, or vice versa, it will go to the highest gear it can without under revving. So, and you get that instantly. You don't really need that on the track where you're going through the gears to engine brake and going out of the corners through all the gears. But it's a very nice feature when you want instant power from a lazy kind of drive to a spirited drive. You just jump from 9th to 2nd or 9th to 4th or 8th, whatever gear you're in, immediately. So that's really a novel solution. I didn't speak about the power of the engine, I think. So we have a new turbo system, which with big turbos to get more power out. The downside of big turbos is that they spool up later and they have more inertia, making them more laggy before they get powerful at higher RPM and give power. So we have developed a pressurized air system where we have a 20-liter carbon fiber air tank on board with 20 liter and 20 bar. And there's a small electric compressor making sure that that pressure is kept up there. And then we have a few strategic nozzles spread out through the turbo system to make sure that we can overcome the inertia of the turbine blades and the compressor blades by shooting bursts of air onto them, and also sealing off the blades at lower engine RPMs where normally a big impeller or a big compressor cannot pump because they're too big. So with a shot of pressurized air, we seal them off so they can start pumping at lower airflows, basically pushing the surge diagram, surge limit in the turbine compressor diagram to the left in the chart, so it acts like a really small turbo at low RPM and spools up like a really small turbo at low RPM, but then becomes a big turbo at high RPM. And this system is very, very lightweight. It's a few nozzles, a few hoses, and a carbon fiber tank and a small compressor. It turned out to be much lighter than a quad turbo system or a triple turbo system or something like that. So with this solution, we have 1280 horsepower on regular 95 octane pump gas, which is 91 octane in the US or the equivalent thereof. And you can also run this car on E85. It has a flex fuel sensor. So on E85, you get 1600 horsepower from a 5-liter engine, which is unheard of in a production car with full emission regulation and catalytic converters and so on. And talking about emission regulations, as I said, this car is homologated for the world market with the most stringent crash testing, smart airbags, and also the most stringent emission testing. So what we have done, we have created a completely set of new cylinder heads with turbulent inducing flaps for startup and low flows at idle and so on to get better combustion. We have a secondary air system to heat up the catalytic converters that is powered by the boost up system with the carbon fiber air tanks. We're using that for both systems, which saves weight and space. And then we have also electrically heated cats. So this car is designed to comply with worldwide emission regulations up to 2026. And given the extreme nature of the car and the extreme performance, that also I would say is completely unheard of. We're making 125 of these cars. It's free for the buyers to choose if they want the more track focused or the less downforce, less drag, higher top speed version. That's part of the specification when you create your spec on the car. So 125 of these, and we have already, before showing this car live to anyone, we already have down payments for 83 cars, or maybe a little bit higher than that now. So there, only a few left. We'll see if there are any left after this show. If there is, we still have, some job left to do, which is fine. But I think, that is probably all I can think of to say about the... Sorry? Oh yeah, one more thing. Thank you for reminding me. I will just let it close. So we actually reinvented the very unusual Koenigsegg door hinge. So it has always been very practical in the sense that the door swings out and clears the entrance freely, so you can get in and out as easy as possible, given that it's an extreme sports car. But you always have to watch out for high curbs and park a little bit away. And incredibly enough, it has very seldom been that anyone has hit a curb, probably because everyone is very aware of it. But we just reshaped the hinge a little bit, not by adding any components, just bending and twisting the parts a little bit in CAD. So we got a new motion into the hinge, which made it possible to also reissue new patents for another 20 years of this hinge mechanism, which is by now, 20 years old, given it was on the very early Koenigsegg's. So if I open a door here now, you will see, you will see that the door also moves upwards, and you can have a super high curb underneath with no problem. On top of that, it carries over the sensor system from the Agera that if there is an obstacle in the way, it will stop. It has kind of a parking sensor system in the door to check that first. And what is even more interesting is that the space for the hinge has stayed the same on this car as on all previous Koenigseggs since the first production Koenigsegg ever. So it's possible to retrofit this door hinge to even the first Koenigsegg and improving its close to curb parking ability.